Someday. There it is.
There it is. Welcome, everybody, back to the Rovertime podcast. This is, what is it, 33rd episode we've done now, right?
About that, yeah.
Yeah.
Approximately.
And today is going to be more freeform. We're definitely going to talk about some of the stuff that's happened over the past week, but we're just gonna bullshit, starting with telling Mark how to use the slow cooker.
You put food in it, press the buttons, and then cook it slowly. There you go.
I heard that you can't possibly mess something up in a slow cooker, but I somehow doubt my abilities to.
That is blatantly a lie. Because you can completely overcook vegetables if you add those in. You can try slow cooking in just water. I've seen a friend do that. It does not turn out well.
Oh, dude. Have you ever had like broccoli that's been cooked too much and it's like mush? That's disgusting.
Yeah. No, that is like the easiest thing to screw up with a slow cooker is to mushify all of the fixins that you're putting in. Meat's kind of hard to screw up with a slow cooker. So that's your like starting base is you get some broth, you slow cook your meat. Google is great for finding temperatures and times and all of that good stuff to make sure that you're not giving yourself salmonella or anything horrible.
Or you can just go to Food Network and then just look it all up. There you go. Just mosey on down to the Food Network website and then just learn about slow cooking.
I mean,
well,
why not?
The reason I brought this topic up is it's a continuation of what was it, the Rovertime in the middle of, not last week, but the week before with How to Adult. And it's like, man, if you want to save money and actually have nutritious meals, being able to use the slow cooker or at least meal prep and sit down and actually create a chart, if you can fill it out, it really helps.
But if you're saving time, does making the chart cost more time than the savings that you get with the slow cooker?
I would say no, because there's nothing actively being done with the slow cooker. Like if you have the ability to time out your schedule to use a slow cooker, there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah, the big thing more is that you want to make sure that you have multiple things which you can cook because you can get really tired of something when you're doing it in large batches.
Yep.
So get yourself some Pyrex. You'll pay it off eventually and make 2 sets of whatever you're making, like a chili and say a curry or something like that. Put them in the freezer. It's all good. Usually I can price it out at for 2 weeks worth of lunches. It's under $100. And usually significantly under $100 depending on where you go for your vegetables. So yeah, How to Adult meal prep.
Great.
Speaking of some adult things, I think that we're finally starting to use the 2018 tax withholdings tables, and I can say, based on just my one paycheck, I know it may not be enough evidence, but it looks like I'm saving 3% each week on my paycheck in taxes. So it feels nice to be getting a little bit more.
Great.
I don't know if anyone else has their experiences like that or not, but
I mean, you're only going to save that for the first like 6 years, and then obviously your taxes are going to go way up to pay for all the tax cuts for these rich people. That's what I keep hearing. That this tax cut is only going to last for like 8 years, so it was obviously worthless and just a huge payout to rich people.
I also saw. I don't know if this is real either, but I saw I think it was posted from the Facebook profile, the God Emperor Trump one.
Mm.
That someone posted like some kind of status where they were complaining about, they're like, oh, good news and bad news, they got accepted for unemployment, but then like they're like, oh, it's so low now that they're not getting enough for them. So like, but it sounds so like entitled. They're like, oh, I'm only getting $180 from unemployment. Like, you shouldn't be getting anything from unemployment. You're unemployed. Like, be lucky that you're getting anything. You're not supposed to be motivated to stay on unemployment. That's the whole point. So good on him. So
this is the problem with unemployment, and in the United States, especially the way it's structured, is that it is structured as an insurance program that morphed into an entitlement program. So it is in a lot of areas and should be a thing where you pay into it. So when you take back out of it, there's no real issue there. There's no like moral issue with people being like, yeah, unemployment's kind of a ripoff, right? But it's not optional, and it just comes out of a government budget at this point, so it's not really there anymore. So that's where we get into the question.
I have a bit of a question about that, Lex. So here in Canada, we do have EI, but it is something which you pay into while you're working, even if you have, you have to have worked in order to withdraw from EI. But we also have a series of programs which sort of accompany that. So if you're on EI, you're actually supposed to be pursuing basically health wellness programs as well as skill improvement programs. And we also have some programs for helping you with your resume, which are also all paid for by the government. So on the US, or at least within your state, on their EI system, are the people required to be showing that they're applying for jobs and actually making use of the services out there?
Yes, but there is a huge caveat to that in that they have to look for jobs. They do not have to accept jobs. So
Yeah,
even,
that's a problem.
even
That's
if
like
they
what
are,
Stan talked about that one time where he had someone trying to like apply for a job, but they're like, "Oh, can you just sign this confirming that I looked for a job?" And he's like, "No, you had no intention of actually taking the job."
yeah, that's a kind of an issue. People will try to maximize their benefit because again, it's become an entitlement thing. You don't pay in, X number of dollars and then expect X number of return on it. So at the end of the day, if you don't just maximize your usage on it, you're kind of screwing yourself, right? And if it's not a job you really want, and most people aren't usually qualified for a job they really want, especially in a down market. So yeah, why not enjoy unemployment? It's way less effort to just continue to get that check. So
All right. Yeah, that's true.
it has a perverse incentive structure in the US especially. I'm not so sure about other countries. I know other countries handle it a little bit differently.
Yeah, no, there is that negative incentive. Like if you were to actually pursue a job you want, you probably wouldn't get it, ergo stay on the system consistently. But that's something I'd have to look up the data for the Canadian numbers, but I know in Europe they have some problems with that. But they also have particular problems with that in most nations that have a high graying of their population. So a lot of older people not moving out of entry-level jobs or even mid-level jobs. So there isn't as much for younger people trying to get into the job market to go after.
Mm-hmm. Well, so the whole the fake unemployment status thing, which is basically what that is they aren't really looking for a job, but they're still technically unemployed, meaning they're pursuing a job that they know no intention of getting. That's one of those things that the universal basic income thing is supposed to combat, is that it erases that perverse incentive. And I'm almost okay with that. Like if it lowers the total outlay and you're just saying, all right, everyone just gets this base amount. So now all of a sudden it's like, well, at least you don't have these people out there artificially pumping up numbers and people playing around with this whole thing. And it gets rid of that unemployment insurance issue and it cuts down on money coming out of paychecks, which is usually a good thing, like net long term in my opinion. But yeah, I don't know. And the gray, it's so hard to like put these in real terms for especially Western worlds where you have these different demographic issues. Because yeah, if there's no jobs available because nobody is advancing and nobody is moving out, and retirements are getting stretched further back because lifespans are getting extended further than people really thought was realistic, you have a lot of issues there that are going to collide all at once.
Good
Yeah.
tap.
So go ahead, Doctor.
Wait, what? Just the whole stretching back of lifespans, like that's fun.
I mean, these are all net positives, right? Like people are outliving where they thought they would be.
Like, oh,
like I know. Here's the thing: when you're 20, you think you're going to live forever, and then you get to 40, and you're like, I'm going to die, and not too long. And you start planning around that. And for people who are, of a certain age, if they were planning on 75, 80 being, completely retired and on government assistance primarily as far as their economic planning went, and most people don't even do that much. But now they're looking at maybe 90 as like a realistic possibility.
Is that like just in America, or is that like across?
That's the Western world, right?
Okay, that's the average.
Yeah, 90 is not an unrealistic number to hit as a person if you don't get hit by a car or have, cancer or, a sudden heart attack. If you're in relatively good health and you live a clean life or even a not so clean life, like 90 is not an unapproachable number.
If you had some fuck ups, but you still managed to maintain a decent health.
Right. You didn't have a heroin problem, but you enjoyed a few cocktails. Like you're still probably looking at 90 years as like a really realistic number to get to.
As long as you didn't think meth is a great idea.
Right. But that's 25 years of not working. and having to support yourself at retirement age of 65, right? You're only working how many years at that? You're working under your 45 years total, and not working 25 years total. Like if we just assume the average of starting work at 20, which is a little off, but whatever. Like for the rough numbers. So are you putting away half your income every year into retirement? Like even with compounding investments, these numbers all start to skew really badly for people. So yeah, if you start then having people who work longer, and when in a lot of Western countries, 55 was a retirement age if you were blue collar, right? Or even 45 if you were in a really difficult job. If you were working in a mine shaft, you weren't working to 65. That's not realistic. But
I'm trying to think of how long my dad has to work right now to be able to retire, because he's been working probably because he's always been doing blue collar jobs, and I think let's see, he's he's 50 now. Shit, I don't know what.
He has 15 years until he hits Social Security retirement age, right?
I'm trying to think because I'm not sure if he has to work just till a certain age or if he has to work a certain amount of time, because he's working for the state now. And he hasn't been working too long. He's probably been working about, I want to say 5 or 6 years now.
He's probably got another 3 years until he gets into some vesting agreement where then it starts to really accumulate pretty fast.
Okay.
And then if you put in a decade or more at a state job, you're generally going to be pretty well taken care of, at least in bare necessities. You get 20 or 25 years, you're talking usually a very cushy retirement. Less so now than before.
Mm-hmm.
What I would say is, so as a teacher or working in the public system here in Canada, they give you a number, which is right now 86. So between your age and your number of years worked, once those hit, I think 86 years, that sort of guarantees your maximized pension for whatever plan you're using. So it really does depend on the numbers and what sort of retirement investment strategy you're trying to pursue, whether it's through your company, on your own, or as a mix of both. Yeah.
All right. I know there's been a big push to modernize those systems, because before 2006, almost all state pension plans in the United States were incredibly skewed and horribly bad about they gave something like an 8 or a 9% yearly return. And it was basically like the world's most awesome 401k plan. And that was unsustainable. So they've been trying to fix that pretty rapidly.
Yeah, state pension funds are going broke. It's insane.
Most of California's debt problem right now is actually in CalPERS.
For my home state.
Yeah, Illinois. Oh my God, Illinois is a financial hellhole.
Jersey, New York, they're all facing the same thing.
Yeah, they have to cut government employee pensions. It's insane.
Speaking of Jersey, things aren't looking too good with the new governor.
Oh, what happened?
What happened? What happened to Jersey?
Well, actually, no. I guess it is a good thing, from the libertarian view. But New Jersey's going to legalize marijuana with the new governor. But at the same time, with the new governor, he's going to reverse the last. Well, and I'm not too sure on the specifics of it, but Governor Christie recently did something to make it easier or quicker to get a handgun license or something, and the new guy's going to reverse it.
Damn it.
Well, you can have your pot or you can have your guns.
I'd rather have guns than pot, to be honest with you.
I'm with Crow, but I think you guys know I'm kind of skewed right now because I don't have any use for recreational drugs in general.
The doctor just wants a pot full of guns.
I do. I just want a pot full of guns.
So, but here's the thing: the way you got it right now, the guns are there. They're legal. They might take some paperwork or some classes. There's some hoops to jump through, but that's cool. You can still get them.
The reason why it had to
you anyway.
Yeah, but it took a really long time to get a handgun permit, and the example of why was because there was a woman who knew that she was in immediate danger. She had a specific threat, but she couldn't get her permit in time, and her friend was not allowed legally to lend her their firearm because it's illegal. so she died by the threat she said she was facing, and because she couldn't get the permit in time.
So I think the lesson there is that you should get the permit before you have an imminent threat.
Or better yet, abolish permits.
Yeah, that too.
That too, yeah.
Or shotguns, because long guns, not as many permit issues.
This is true.
But you can't walk down the street with a shotgun effectively. Like, you're gonna stand out.
I mean,
to be fair,
that's half the mission of a gun.
Hold on now. Hold on. There's a way if you really want to make that happen. It's probably not. It's probably the more shady thing you could do, but like, fuck. How long are they? Like, get a little Keltec KSG. Like, I think maybe just a hair over 16 inches. You can find a way to store that on your fucking great defense. If you really want to get arrested, though, but still.
All pedantic gun laws from New Jersey aside, I'm actually reading a really interesting book right now. It's called The Case Against Education by Brian Kaplan. Have any of you ever heard of Brian Kaplan?
Sounds familiar.
He's an economist. He was on the Rubin Report. Have you ever watched it?
A couple times, but never seen Kaplan on it.
All right. Well, basically, Brian Kaplan is a very libertarian economist. I love his work. He's really cool. But he wrote an interesting book called The Case Against Education, Why the Education System is a Waste of Time and Money. It's an excellent book that basically details that school is pretty useless. Because here's the thing. It turns out the average cost of putting each kid through K through 12 school is $140,000. All right, $140,000 per kid. All right,
$40,000 to have your kid turn out to be a soy boy. It's a shame.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Here's the thing, though. We're spending that kind of money, and there are lots of stats that are very depressing. But every time you hear one of these kinds of stats, just remember $140,000, because that's how much it costs to put these kids through school. All right, so we see that. I kid you not, 70% of American adults cannot name all three branches of the federal government. 35% can't name any. 33% can name at least one, but not all three. And that's after years of history and civics classes, for crying out loud.
Well, but that's the thing. It's not years of civics classes. It's 2 months of civics classes in 7th grade that nobody cared about, right? Because
pretty much, yeah.
The way our system's really badly structured, and we don't really care about things like civics or even history or having them taught properly. I don't think that's an indictment of the education as a thing, but it definitely makes a case for vouchers, right? Like, I'm okay with requiring spending on education and for like collectivizing that spending process and formalizing it a little bit to create a better market. But yeah, holy crap.
I'm more in the camp of what I think would be really interesting thing to, I don't know, like this is just very uneducated on the subject of like how to reform it. But me and my friend had once said, like, what if we went from like, I don't know, we had all the basic shit we need to learn by like 8th grade, right? And then replace high school with like, I don't know, more trades, more stuff that you can learn.
No. Let me tell you why that's a really bad idea. Oregon actually implemented this. They called it like a SNAP program or something. The idea was that in 7th grade you would pick a focus, and that would be what you would try to focus your educational electives around, right? And you would try, and the school would help get internships and things, and you could substitute those out for necessarily in-class electives. So instead of taking home ec, you would say, my focus is mechanical or car mechanics, and you could take a internship or even a part-time job at a mechanic shop and substitute that for home ec. That was the idea. What we saw with it, though, was that 7th graders are really horrible at picking what they want to do with the rest of their lives. And so the educational focuses ended up being a really painfully bad system of like getting people stuck into things they ended up not actually excelling at or being good at.
Yeah. The problem with that is systems that are focused around streaming can be effective if you can collect the necessary data and if said streaming is reversible. Mm-hmm. So if you have a system where you assess, let's say, students in grade 5, grade 7, and in grade 10, they get to opt into a program if they so choose, that is focused more towards something which is an interest of theirs, and you give them, let's say, a 3-month period where they can actually step out of the program if it doesn't appear for them, that actually works quite well. but facilitating that is very expensive. And building the infrastructure around it takes time. So in Italy and also in, next to Sweden on the eastern side, Finland, and Germany have all tried this to varying degrees of success. And what they find is what they find for all educational systems is that for the students that would have benefited from it anyways, we will see a benefit. The problem is that not all students are going to have capabilities that fit into any one particular school structure. So you're always going to have a fairly sizable population of people for whom the structure doesn't work. And that's been the biggest problem with education historically as well, is you can kind of get a best fit, but the people who are going to benefit from it are benefiting from it already. The ones who aren't most likely won't. So it's kind of a tough thing to do, but streaming someone as early as grade 7 is far too early.
Well, yeah, Germany, Switzerland, Austria, they do this kind of stuff with apprenticeships and whatnot. But the bottom line is that we should really just slash education spending from taxpayers, because if you take a look at what education actually is, it's just signaling. It's honestly just signaling to employers. So we're just basically raising the bar of how many credentials you need to get the same exact job, which is why now, because the government's paying for everyone to have college degrees now, we see that you have secretary positions where it says, bachelor's degree required, when it didn't used to be the case that you needed a bachelor's degree to be a fucking secretary. So it's just credential inflation. That's all we're doing right now. So the best thing to do would just be to slash education spending, and perhaps to have parents send their kids to places where they just go over reading, writing, and arithmetic, because we get the same results in all honesty.
See, it's shit like this that makes me really glad I dropped out and I don't question that. I'm just like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm not going to deal with this because it sounds like a fucking trap.
But the vast majority of people do not remember the vast majority of what they went over in school, so you're not losing out, dude. Trust me.
Wait, you dropped out of high school?
No, I just dropped out of college.
Oh, okay. No, yeah, good.
See, when I graduated from college, people were just starting to have that mentality change because the price was really starting to spike up. And I was like okay with it, but the more I look back on it, the more I'm like, yeah, I really feel bad for the people that paid full freight to go to university with me. I don't feel bad about my choice because scholarships are a thing, and I made sure to get all of them I could. But yeah, it's a lot of money for not a lot of return unless you are in a career field that actually gets that specialized education.
Yeah, and even so, even with engineering, I've talked to plenty of engineering graduates, and they don't get the practical stuff they actually need for the job. Even by their own admission, they didn't get the practical stuff they needed from college. It's a waste of time.
And they went to a shitty university, but it
doesn't matter where you go. It's just you learn a lot of theoretical stuff. You don't really know the job until you actually do the job.
Yeah, but that's engineering degrees are all about the theoretical underpinnings of your practical job, and thank God they fucking even if it's I remember this thing about lateral force loads that I should probably go look up again and make sure that I understand correctly when I build this bridge is super important when you're talking about professional engineering, which is why it is one of those things that it's kind of okay to have a really high bar to and a big signaling effort into and a regulatory effort into.
There's no real reason why we really need that. I mean, if you take a look at the Empire State Building, for instance, it was built in a much less regulated time where people weren't just going to get master's degrees and PhDs just to get a basic engineering job.
Nobody gets a master's or a PhD in engineering. That's not a thing.
Yeah, it is.
Not for fucking professional engineering. You do not get a master's degree to go be an engineer. You do get a master's degree if you want to do a specialized engineering study, but that's high level stuff for very specific tasks. When we're talking about fucking rocket engineering or fucking chemical stuff, that's not I'm going to go be an architect type stuff. That's not I'm going to go build bridges type of stuff. You just get your bachelor's and you go get your PE license. That's the general pipeline of engineering. That's a big joke.
I'm not sure if it's the same across the border, but here you don't actually need a master's to be an engineer. What you do need, though, is what we would call an extended bachelor's. So an engineering degree actually requires more credits than a standard degree. So you are there longer, and then within the field that you're in, you'll get a specialization, and then you get what's called your PEng, which is a certification from whatever field of engineering you're going into that says you can sign off on your own work. But there are engineers that go for their masters. A lot of those end up teaching at the university or the college level, so they're actually priming themselves for getting back into the teaching role, maybe coming out of a successful engineering career, or maybe not so successful. But you don't actually need a master's that is to be an engineer.
So this is the thing, in the US especially, engineering is generally a separate school from primary college. It's usually a directed course. So you're coming in as a freshman with the idea of, I am probably going to be an engineer. You can transfer in if you have the right grades and you have the right prereqs, but most schools want you to start. So you're going to do a 4-year program for it, but you're not diverting the same way. You don't have that open year or two where you're like, I don't know if I'm undeclared. I don't know what my major is going to be. Yeah, if you do that, you're spending an extra year at school to finish an engineering degree.
Yeah. But in either case, what was the topic we were actually talking about when we got to engineering?
Schools and how they're useless.
There we go. Okay.
Yeah, they really are. Yeah.
So this is a separation of schools. I don't think schools are useless. I think public education, as it is structured in a lot of ways, has a lot of room for improvement. But I think that gets back to more of the fact we don't have any real market forces going on. And Crow's right when he says like we're not engaging those market forces in college in as much anymore either, because nobody cares about what college costs and nobody cares about where the money's coming from because, I just get my loans. And so schools are like, we can just keep making it more expensive and they keep paying for it. So all the luxuries keep coming in. And the quality of the education doesn't particularly matter because you're still only graduating about a quarter of the population anyways. You're bringing in a little more than half, and most of those people aren't going to graduate. So what do you care?
We actually have...
In 1945, only about 25 to 30% of people graduated high school. It seems like society worked just fine.
I disagree with the statement that society worked just fine. There were vastly more people who were completely dumb and fucking unable to function in society. They just died at greater rates. That wasn't like a net gain. Overall.
What are you talking about? Today, we see, even if you take a look at the citizenship test, about 70% of American adults fail it. And that's after 140 grand worth of schooling. So I don't really see how you can make a defense of the government school system saying that it's making people not dumb.
Hey, wait, what year were you talking about, Crow?
Year what? 1945, I believe.
Okay, well, to counter Lex's point of view, they weren't eating Tide Pods back in 1945.
They weren't Tide Pods in 1945.
I will disagree with you on that. Fucking, you'll find the number of chemicals and retarded shit being put into food products and being sold at that time, not just in the U.S., but especially in the U.K. for some reason, was astronomically high. Like, just chemicals that today were like, no, that's a horrible idea.
Yeah,
so, yes.
Obesity rates were lower.
Well, hence why Heinz could use the fact that they used 100% real tomatoes as a selling point at that period of time, and actually people would go and buy it because they're like, no filler, no wood chips or other stuff.
Right.
Of
Yeah.
When, by the way, wood chips are the benign item you can name in this conversation.
I believe it.
What's one of the worst ones in ketchup?
Probably lead.
Like cocaine being a not insignificant portion of the food ingredients in our food supply is one of those things you just go back to. Like, we still drink Coca-Cola.
Yeah. You could argue that sugar is also a bad thing too. Sugar might be worse than Coke in some ways. I don't think anyone ever got diabetes from drinking Coca-Cola.
No, you just had a heart attack. It's much more.
What happened? You probably just fucking died.
I don't know. Did they die? Were there actually significant deaths from heart attacks from Coke?
See, this is the thing. Like, if you don't have a good reference point for it, like starting off like to diagnose that, what's Quarter going to say? 40-year-old dude died of a heart attack. Like, Coke? I don't know. It's a 40-year-old dude whose cholesterol's through the roof. He's like 300 pounds in 1940. I don't know. What are you going to put the cause of death on there?
I don't think people were 300 pounds in 1940.
There were plenty of people who were, but
Yeah, Minding Freedom is in the chat, and he says Hitler ate Tide Pods.
Hitler ate a bullet. He ate a bullet. Jeez.
Yeah, it's a little off topic here, but here's just something I came across. And I don't know if everyone else has this, but I have separate YouTube channels just to separate my subscriptions. So like, if I feel like getting away from politics, I'll go to my regular like YouTube account. And I watched that one channel, Behind the Meme, and he had the video about Do You Know the Way, and it's funny because right in the middle of the video, he had like a bit just like awing over Lauren Southern. I'm like, that's funny. That this YouTube channel about memes, like, well, I guess it is like I guess memes are more right wing, I guess. So I guess it's to be expected nowadays. But I just thought that was funny.
I feel like the idea is that memes are supposed to be all inclusive, but it just so happens that some people on the right are better at it than some people on the left.
More people on the right have a sense of humor.
Exactly.
That's the thing. Yeah, if you're with the group that is willing to not take offense to things, you will be able to meme. That is a prerequisite. So
that's just a good for
right wingers are not unlike the bone in your arm. Humorous.
God, Jesus Christ.
I'll take that one. That was good.
I hope Stan's watching.
What I'll jump in on in this particular topic, though, is it's not that people on the left don't meme, because if we take memetics to be like basically infectious thought, things which trigger us to focus on them more and we find them reflexively amusing, or at least reflexively appealing in some way, their memes are more along ideological lines. So when we say things like, what is it? The patriarchy is taking over everything. Well, that's not a picture with a title on it, but it is still a meme. It's something which is jumping from one person's head to another person's head without any sort of critical thought, but you have a point of reference from which to draw on. So most memes on, let's say, the right tend to be image-based and also idea-based, whereas on the left, they tend to be ideologically based and group-orientated.
So here's the thing. I think that's boiling down something like that is not a point that the left would make. They will not say things like the patriarchy is controlling everything. That is the ironic memeing of them by the right. So like their ideological stances, when they get boiled down, do become very meme-tastic, but that's not something they do themselves. They tend to take it and pick it up when it's given to them and try to run with it until they realize how absurd it sounds often. Like the Russian narrative is one of those great examples of where they started something very seriously and it ends up becoming very comical after we actually repeat it verbatim back to them, right? Like, it doesn't sound crazy until you see friggin' Richard Spencer going off about Russian involvement and how crazy it is and just totally playing it up and hamming it up. And then you're like, oh, yeah. Why is this a CNN talking point every day? Yeah. And they can't see
because
that.
They don't know what else to do.
So that's like, I don't know how to quantify it.
Well, see,
I get what you're saying. The ideological push from them is they are very good at getting very serious topics to relay in that viral sense that we kind of attribute to memes, but they don't seem to catch the funny, and I don't know why.
Well, if we want to go down this rabbit hole, because of course it was Dawkins who came up with the idea of memes and memeplexes, we could say that they lack the memeplex necessary for self-critical thought or making fun of themselves, whereas the right seems to have adapted this memeplex. So maybe there's some sort of internet culture evolutionary pressure being applied to both sides, and we have differential adaptation.
Oh,
you said a lot of cool stuff, and it's making my brain hurt in the best way.
I'll take that. That all sounds credible and smart.
That sounds fucking awesome.
What sounds super awesome? What?
Pay attention, Crow. Damn.
Sorry, I wasn't
We're gonna put Dinner on the spot, and he has to repeat that.
What did we say?
We can just go back and rewatch the video later.
I dozed out for a second.
I agree with the point, though. I think there might be some credibility to that, and that because the right was so at a losing vector at its the internet's apex, right? So when that early internet of just complete shit show started, the right was definitely politically weak. They were culturally weak. They had you were talking about
make the laugh of the damned, because fuck it, it's all burning down.
Right. So, but at the time, they had to adjust just to get anything done. Right. In order to have any communicative power, they had to be funny. They had to be self-critical, and there was a lot to self-criticize too. And so you have this group of people who was just like, we're just going to make funny and offensive stuff, in different measures, and you had different subcultures that created that. But they all had to coalesce around that central idea of freedom of expression, right? Because it's the internet, because they were offensive, because they were saying things that were inappropriate. And when you're doing all of those things, you have to be for free expression. Otherwise, people will silence you. Mm-hmm. And now that's just advanced. And I mean, maybe part of it is Gamergate. Like, thank God that slid towards the right end of the angle at the end.
Just kind of tailspinned off of that, dude. I mean...
Well, into it too. Like that was the publicization of the sort of very subtle debate of intersectional feminism.
Right.
It all sort of came to being in the public consciousness all at the same time, and it was the first time I saw, at least in open media, where we had a conversation about how women who say bad things happen to them might lie.
Yeah.
And everyone was like, "Oh, well, yeah, that's duh."
That's totally fair.
Right? Like, you say it, and it's like, yeah, of course they might lie. But nobody ever internalized that. And I had never done it either. Like, growing up, I remember going back when girls said, oh, yeah, that dude, they said raped, and looking, like, to properly categorize it, it would be sexually assaulted now, I guess, is more vernacularly correct. But I would just accept that and be like, oh, that dude's an asshole. Fuck that guy. Like, I want to beat the shit out of that guy. Yeah. And now I look back, and I'm like, oh, wait, no. That probably didn't happen the way she described it. Because, and it didn't seem to hurt her that much, but it was a way for her to shit talk this dude. And like at the time, you didn't think about it in those terms. And only in retrospect can I be like, oh, well, maybe that's how that went down. I still don't know, and I'm not going to make a judgment either way on any of them. But today, I won't make the judgment on either of them. Before, I was very judgmental against that guy, right? That's the difference we've kind of come to change. And yeah, that was all very much a matter of timing. None of that was structured or planned or plotted out. It was just, here's a whole bunch of crazy societal shit all hitting the wall all at the same time.
What a time to be alive, right? I love it.
Sort of scares the shit out of me that we can literally have very monumental political changes based on, hey, 4chan's kind of popular right now, and the organizer of it kind of went off the deep end over Gamergate, and that created Poll, and Poll sort of was the meme engine of Trump. Like, if that sequence of events doesn't happen, I don't know if Trump wins.
Oh, God. That was a long tangent. God dang, but it was like, it was a fascinating one, man.
You're making me look forward to the 2020 elections for some reason.
Right? Because what's going to happen this time? That's not just the only thing that had to happen, right? There was a ton of other just events that had to take place that are all coming from disparate angles, and for this one narrow election, but it had such epic consequences, and we're going to have to do it all over again.
But like I said, things are looking good right now. Like we are making America greater. People are going to see it in the numbers, and they're not going to care about all the wording and all that stuff. I mean, what is the stock market at now? What, 26,600?
Yep.
Making Bitcoin. One Johnny Cash song. How is the water?
These liberal companies are participating in the wage hikes voluntarily and the bonuses.
Yeah, and then now we have companies. And now we have tariffs. Why the fuck is he putting in place tariffs? That's just a tax. Makes no sense.
Trump isn't anti-tax. He's anti-particular taxes.
I'm not, but I'm just saying that. What's the point of putting a tax cut and then putting in place a tariff? It makes no sense.
Tariff on foreign imports.
Foreign imports, yeah. It's a different tax.
That's stupid, though. It would be like...
It's not. Because here's the thing. Other countries have disproportionate... labor costs. So in order to equalize that, tariffs are a mechanic you can use.
But that's bad policy because it increases costs. And so you have less money to buy
No.
other stuff.
It doesn't necessarily increase costs. If you hire Americans, your net cost doesn't change from the tariffs, and if you continue to hire outsourced labor, it just equalizes it. So this is the thing: if you have things like airplanes, which is the hot topic this week, right? Where you have one government saying, yeah, we will subsidize this production and we will create jobs in our country and lower our labor costs. That's good for that country. Congratulations. But when they bring them into the United States, it's bad for one of our few excelling manufacturing industries. And we say, hey, we might have an issue here with one of our trade deals. And then we rule on it and Boeing loses.
I think he's just matching China's tariff on us. Correct?
Some of it, yeah. Some of it
Now
is.
so we're getting into a trade war. God.
This is the thing. Trade wars start and they end with the signing of a signature, and usually they just end up with, hey, how about we actually have a real trade deal? That's how trade deals happen, right? It's, I'm going to have a tariff on you. Oh, all right, well, I'll pay back this. And then a bunch of businesses that say, hey, guys, this is kind of getting out of hand, and we hate giving you a ton of money for every little issue. So how about we just have a more realistic trade deal that benefits all of us? And you get a trade group that says, hey, this is the thing that should happen. And hopefully it doesn't happen like the TPP, where it's a backroom deal that nobody knows anything about. But hopefully it happens in the light of day and you get something a little closer to NAFTA. And we're about to renegotiate NAFTA anyways, right? It's about to come up. And that's one of the big reasons Trump's there. And hopefully this is him starting from a really strong negotiating position.
Well,
because if he's willing to use tariffs, they're very incentivized to have a solid trade deal.
And that's the thing, is when it comes to tariffs, you have to treat them as one tool in your toolkit, because they, like anything, suffer from escalation and then being overutilized. So in Brazil, for example, they have massive tariffs about imported goods to the detriment of the quality of life of the people living in the country.
Mm-hmm.
So because they want to protect their industries, they are at the same time preventing the development of competing industries within their own nation, because it's hard to start a new company when your government is heavily involved in subsidizing already existing companies or potentially competing ones. So they have, in effect, tariffed themselves into a lower standard of living because of the degree to which they use it. But you can use tariffs as a political tool to say, hey, we'll raise this on this particular thing if you don't negotiate with us on better terms. And using them that way is effective. And it's a short-term thing, but it's also tied to trying to get a better deal, and ideally a better deal between that benefits both partners. With NAFTA getting renegotiated here in Canada, we're kind of sitting here and going, this is kind of rough for us, because we've always been of the opinion that we raise tariffs against things which would compete with Canadian products or Canadian cultural goods. And we've been able to do that historically in order to protect those particular cottage industries. But it looks like more and more we might not be able to do it to the same degree. And we are kind of worried, once again, that we will lose our economic identity, as it were, to American corporations who can produce things far more cheaply and far more efficiently than we can.
Yeah, just like how we lost our identity as farmers.
Apparently we are Canada's Mexico. But that's... No, that's right. That is a really succinct or a really compelling way to put all of this. And I think it actually ties into the immigration debate really well, and this week's events with how Trump handled the DACA policy of basically saying, I will give you double what you asked for the Democrats to say, nope, no deal. And now he gets to walk away and say, I offered them the moon, and they said no. They obviously don't really care about dreamers, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to legalize 400,000 dreamers, the best and the brightest, the greatest, the youngest who came in and had no choice. And I'm going to get my wall, and I'm going to pass the RAISE Act. And I did the negotiation thing. They said no. They don't really care. It's all politics to them.
They're making him look good, these fucking morons.
Right? And that's the thing. And I think it's the same way with the trade tariffs and a lot of the stuff Trump does. He's one or two times I would just say that's him bumbling into being a good negotiator. but I'm willing to just accept he's good at it. Like
too many coincidences.
Yeah,
He's a good negotiator.
He keeps doing it, so I'm just gonna have to accept this is what he does. He starts with this ludicrous position that everyone thinks is a horrible thing, and he somehow, the number of times you see articles of, oh, the right feels betrayed because Trump did yada yada yada, and then it turns around like 48 hours later, they're like, oh yeah, apparently he got everything he wanted.
The catch-22, because
speaking of
sometimes end up with Trump Airlines, where he pays quadruple for what it is he wanted. So it might be a strategy, but it's a strategy which has high risk when the other people can figure out what's going on.
Well, that's the thing.
What he benefits from is that the Democratic Party actually doesn't have the cohesion which it likes to project that it does, and so they can't actually get consensus on their particular action, because had they signed off on this and said, yeah, give us that would have been a major victory for them, both within the media but also in getting things done. But it kind of highlights that the DACA people are more of a political tool than an actual problem which they want to address.
Yep.
Because if we think about it in terms of just voting base, 800,000 people plus or minus doesn't actually shift much in terms of voting or demographics, but it does give them a very convenient whipping boy to point towards and saying how bad we're treating this particular group of people. So they don't quite know what to do with it either.
It's the same way gay marriage was used, right? It's a small portion of the population. It doesn't actually have any tangible effect on the right of America. So why did they care so much? Because it was a really good fundraising opportunity, and it was a really good way to get people motivated out to the polls. And it worked out. It worked out for like 16, 20 years for both sides to kind of stoke that issue. And
I know, it's so stupid. People focus on the wrong things. This is what I hate about politics. If we're going to focus on anything, if I were to just pick a random thing, I'll pick, I don't know.
Well, isn't politics basically like a societal level smoke and mirrors kind of thing? Just like, hey, look over here while I'm doing this shit behind the scenes. Because
exactly.
I don't know if it is. I don't know if it is that, or if it's just that people have a definitive things they can latch onto and touchstones that they can feel in their lives. And when people feel threatened in their faith, they are going to cling to whatever they can of it. And they are going to try to have that tribal mentality. And I think DACA works very similarly, because immigration and that tribal nature of I don't even know how to describe it, because we've muddied the waters so much with the ethno-nationalists and that whole race debate. But
yeah, it's fucking
the idea of immigrant to America being a class, sort of in that whole state where, like, it doesn't matter if you came from Honduras or El Salvador or Cuba or Mexico or like Poland, like you are all still in the same sort of class of people, and you all have the same issue and like portfolio of things that you should care about, is a thing that has sort of coalesced, and that becomes a tribal thing, right? So it all ends up being these micro tribal things, and they try to amplify people to harden them into partisans. And it works really more than we'd want to. But it's not the worst system in the world. It's just... Actually, no, it is the worst system in the world. It's just better. It's better than all the other options, right? Democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the other ones that we've found.
No. Republics are better than democracies by far.
Well, but representative systems of government, like the statement applies to republics, democracies, anything with a representative system.
Yeah, any government really.
Yeah. If voting is a key component of your system, it sucks, but it is better than all of the other things. Like, there's no way to like crown a king or put in a monarchy or like just have anarchy. Like, those three options don't work any better, right? So
I would disagree, but whatever. Just take a look at. I would say every single time government has gotten out of people's lives, it's worked out for the best.
I agree with that, but there has to be a transition from the government being involved to the government not being involved, and you see improvement on that note.
Fine. I would agree. You can have a transition. I would rather just nuke it, but hey, whatever. We can have a transition as long as we're going in the right direction. I'm happy.
Yeah, that's when you maximize liberty, you tend to maximize results as well. But if you simply take away security and don't do anything to maximize liberty out of that scenario, you can end up with even worse results. And I think they end up being hideously negative, i.e. Libya.
Yeah.
Or Zimbabwe. Or, well, really, let's just all point in the general direction of Africa, and you're going to find a country that is a pretty good example of this. South America also qualifies in this.
Actually, many countries that have gotten rid of dictatorships actually improved by economic metrics. So Africa's still shitty, but they did improve ever since they just kicked out their dictators.
Right, but then some of them have elected new dictators, I guess.
Quote.
Right. Well, like they elected them once, and then they just never left. So, like, at what point does an elected leader become a dictator? Like, how many skipped
after 2 terms?
How many skipped elections do you have to go with before you like transition that title?
Yeah, I guess the bottom line though is we agree that people focus on the wrong issues. Okay, I never cared about gay marriage. I honestly never cared about. I don't know why people talked about it so much.
So, this is an interesting story from this week. Alabama passed in their state senate a legal change to remove the Alabama state government from marriage.
Great, that's great.
I was like, holy shit! If I would have been a supporter of gay marriage long before, if I could have known it would have actually provoked a conservative state to say, oh yeah, maybe we shouldn't be involved in this.
That's great. Great. Now I care about gay marriage. It's basically the one thing that would get people to say, fuck it, nuke the entire thing. The gays can get married. No one can get married now.
Right? That's part of the argument. Is like, oh, that was the counter argument. This is a bash on lesbian and gay couples. It's like, wait, really? Like, you have identically equal rights. It is literally just contract law. It is exactly what you stated it was before. But now you're bitching because the Republicans are like, we don't want to be associated with you, and we want to ensure that religious clergy members can't be forced to organize your marriages, which is the whole goal of it, right?
Yeah, I love that. That's great. Yeah. That is the best thing. Just get government out of marriage. If you want to be butt buddies, whatever, I don't give a shit. Go ahead. Just do what you want.
But see, this is the thing. It's a good idea to get the government out of marriage. It is not a good idea to dissolve the institution of marriage and the concept of a family, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. You don't want to say we don't want families. We just don't need a judge stamping off and saying you can get married. It's like, no, you agree to your contract. You go have your ceremony, and whatever religion you say has province over you, congratulations. That's all you need to do, right?
I wonder though, from a legal perspective, how would that impact on divorce proceedings?
It's just a dissolution of a contract. Alabama's already no fault, so.
Okay, so that would make sense, and that would probably explain how they could go about constructing the bill as they did. Just to say the state's not got any hand in it, therefore
the state certifies your marriage contract, and you are not allowed to marry or to enter into a marriage contract between anyone of like close family relation, and you are only allowed to be in one of these agreements at a time. So that's how it basically fundamentally ends up being the same thing, and they still get a stamp so they can take it to another state and be like, we're married, right? Because that was the other big issue. And they're like, this qualifies all legal things, but we don't say who gets married. We don't care. We're just out of it, right?
Yeah, but I can see why advocates for, let's say, homosexual marriage and other stuff would be somewhat put out by that, because they want the stamp to mean that society tacitly approves. Mm-hmm. All this is saying is society doesn't care. Do what you want.
Basically just fuck off. You'll stop being a bunch of attention-seeking whores. Just shut up. Be happy. Do your relationship. We don't give a shit.
Have you met these people? They can't be happy, Crow.
So they can't. That's the problem. They just can never be happy. They're always miserable. They're always trying to seek attention. They're always trying to bully Christians. Just fuck off.
I feel like if I a hug, they'd like recoil in pain.
This is my secret theory that the difference between decidedly left and decidedly right people is that decidedly right people do not believe that government qualifies as society. Like that laws do not construct what society is and believes in. So the government does not give you approval over what you do, right? And then the left feels the exact opposite. Whatever the law is, that is what society is saying. And I see the point of both, but I definitely side right, obviously, on this one. But yeah, at the end of the day, society has accepted gay relationships and even marriage at this point. So for them to like have that feeling, it does feel kind of like they're throwing a pity party now, where it's like, hey, that argument you were making that had a much better resolution, and that I got called a bigot for even proposing in California during Prop 8 vote, is there, and you can use it, and nobody has to care. Nobody should stop you from getting married. I agree. Nobody should stop anyone from getting married. If you love someone, congratulations. Go have fun.
Yeah. The way I see it is just that people put way too much into government as a whole. I mean, the fact that people even think that this is a sacred institution. I mean, I think that the divorce rate kind of nuked the sacredness of the institution long before gays did. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of contract law is a sacred organization just in and of itself. The ability to contract and make agreements that you're being bound to by law is a fundamental part of our society. It is a hugely important pillar of any libertarian society too. And I don't think that putting it up on that pedestal is necessarily a bad thing.
Well, I'm not talking about contract law in general. I'm just talking about the government sanctioned marriage.
But that's the thing. That is the core of it, right? Is that the marriage contract is a huge deal. And it is a fundamental underpinning of Western society. And of American society, more so even than just Western Europe, right? Like Western Europe figured out a way to sort of eschew it a little bit, statistically speaking. But North America, holy crap, we are really set on the whole idea of, you get married, you have kids, you have a family, you own a home. These are, for a century or so, this was the American dream.
Even owning a home, I'm not really into that part, but yeah, a lot of people are, unfortunately.
Well, having having housing security, right? Having enough wealth and the ability to employ and valuable enough skills that you do not worry about the roof over your head, right?
Sure.
That is the concept there. That is the root goal of that, is that you have a committed partner for your life, that you will raise a family with them, and that you do not worry about where they put their head down to sleep. Right? If you can achieve all of those, that's the American dream. And yeah, sometimes it takes different forms. Sometimes it's owning a suburban household. Sometimes it's a penthouse in New York. Sometimes it's, a micro house out in the middle of, the Pacific Northwest forest. And none of these things
rent. That's my dream, really.
Or you rent a studio apartment in, downtown Ohio. All of these things are perfectly valid. And if that's where you want to live, cool. There are economic arguments for renting too.
Just going to jump in for a sec there, guys. Mark, you were signing that you have something to say.
Yeah.
It's it's unrelated to what you're talking about now, but we only got a couple minutes left. I just wanted to bring up that one. I saw that all the border wall prototypes apparently are completed and passed all tests with flying colors.
Woo!
So people can't climb over them?
No, no, the top is rounded, so you can't put a grappling hook or anything like that.
What about a ladder?
Nope. Because again, the top is rounded and I forget. It's something about it, but yeah, no, they all passed.
I'm excited to see that actually work. I still have my doubts about a wall being a good use of public spending, but
yeah, likewise. Honestly, I never thought that the wall would actually happen. I just thought it was a meme, to be honest, but I didn't think it would actually happen.
But here's the thing: Trump, without actually building the wall, managed to cut a third of illegal immigration just by talking about it. So you know what? Maybe I'm underestimating the quality of a wall here. And here's the $26 billion for a public-funded project that's going to be infrastructure jobs. This is a $26 billion shovel-ready job, as we called it in 2009. Right?
It's still for a wall that's kind of useless.
And again, the whole thing about Mexico paying for it, a lot of people, I feel, think that means that Mexico is going to give us a check that's going to say for the border wall, but no, it's not. In time, it's just he's going to just in the relationship between the United States and Mexico, there's going to be.
I'm gonna laugh when NAFTA 2019 has just a provision in there for a $26 billion fucking transfer of money from Mexico to the United States for undisclosed reasons.
Well, it's just gonna, or it might just be whatever the deal ends up being. Our relationship costs them the amount that the wall costs, but it's not going to be directly for the wall. It's just we're going to get money from Mexico, and it's enough to cover the wall.
I mean, that's the thing. Like, yeah, and this is one of those negotiating things where, like, Mexico could have been like, there will never be a wall. But instead, Trump gave them this thing where they can say, we'll never pay for the wall. Now, at this point, Mexico has tangentially agreed that the wall is a perfectly acceptable idea. They just don't want to pay for it. So, if this is a Trump negotiating thing, cool. All right, whatever. Again.
No. Referencing Brian Kaplan again, I think he makes a pretty good argument for just opening the border.
I disagree because Mexico is not a commensurate economy with ours, and if you have just take two bodies of water, right, and they have a dividing wall between them. One is twice as high as the other. You can take water from the low one and even them out very slowly without any real issues. But if you just remove the divider between them, like, water is going to spill out, and you have a net loss of quantity there, right? Like, there's going to be horrible things that happen.
Well, here's the thing, back in the 60s when the border, throughout the 1960s when the border between America and Mexico was basically wide open, 85% of Mexicans went back home. And they came here for seasonal jobs and then just went back home to see their families.
Yeah, the disparity of wealth and resources was vastly diminished at the time, though. Mexico was a much better country to live in, and the United States was not nearly as great a country to live in, just on all terms, right? And the Southwest especially was not nearly as rich and well-developed and prosperous. And there was not a movement of people who literally wanted to take back the western half of the country for Mexico with political power. So I argue that all of those things have changed, and that probably changes that dynamic a bit. I don't disagree with you that immigration is a good idea long term, but having it in a controlled method and doing something to help protect Mexico from brain drain is kind of a necessity at this point.
Now, Super Bowl picks.
Patriots.
I don't think we're gonna have an episode next week because of Super Bowl Sunday, but I'm probably not gonna watch it because it's the two of my three least favorite teams in the league.
I don't know any football teams, so I'll just say the super duper pumpkin spice lattes. There you go.
I think the Patriots will win, and I will be slightly annoyed by that. And
yeah, I like that. I like the sound of that. Patriots, sure, yeah, whatever.
The only way it could be worse if it was Patriots versus Cowboys.
Oh, I like Cowboys more actually. Yeah, Cowboys. Yeah.
Who's the bigger Patriots?
No, I like it. The Cowboys sounds cooler. Cowboys sounds cooler. Cowboys.
All right. Well,
yeah, Cowboys. There you
that's all for this one, guys. We will probably not see you next week. Probably a week after that. But
don't eat Tide Pods while we're gone.
Yeah, don't eat Tide Pods.
Yeah, for the love of God, do not eat those.
No. If you have a strong urge to eat Tide Pods, you go do that. Eat a lot of them and remove yourself from the gene pool quickly.
You will puke up blood. Do not do it, please. For the love of God,
please.
You will puke blood. Please, just stop.
Anyway, don't forget to check out Matt Christiansen's show here in about a little less than a half hour. We will see you guys soon, hopefully.
See Roman on CRTV this week.
Also, yes.
Oh yeah, that too. Yeah. And don't eat Tide Pods for the love of God.